She arrives to work in an old estate and accidentally finds a childhood photo of herself. The house where she feels like a stranger suddenly begins to reveal secrets that it has kept for years. Every room, every shadow and look awakens memories in her that seem to be non-existent. But when the past catches up with her face to face, she must decide whether to run or stay to finally become herself. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you don't miss new stories. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft copper tones, when Clara Bergman walked up the wide marble steps to the wrought iron gates. Beyond them, like in a fairy tale, lay Villa Eltendorf, an ancient estate in the hills, surrounded by gardens and lush cypress trees. Today she was working as a waitress at a closed evening. The order was special, a private event for an old German family whose names meant nothing to Clara. But as soon as she passed under the arch of the main entrance, something inside her trembled. A strange, almost instinctive feeling, as if her footsteps had already sounded in these corridors, as if she were returning, not visiting for the first time. In her hands was a tray with crystal glasses. She was wearing a flawless white shirt, a dark apron, her hair pulled back. She moved among the guests without attracting attention. That was how service personnel should be. Here, under the crystal chandeliers and piano music, she was a shadow, part of the background. And yet, her heart echoed loudly at every turn, at every room, as if the house echoed in her. As Clara passed the fireplace, decorated with gilded frames with photographs, her gaze accidentally stopped. Her step froze. In the very center, among the faded images of an old family, there was one photograph, as if it did not belong to her. A little girl, about 5 years old, in a red dress with a white collar, blonde hair, a smile. Clara felt her legs give way. She knew that face. It was her. The tray in her hand shook, but she held on. No one noticed. The laughter continued behind her, but everything around her seemed to have gone silent. She took a step back. Looked again. There was no mistake. She had the same photograph in an old album, the only family heirloom her mother had kept. Only that one was black and white, and here it was in color, lovingly framed. Her breathing hitched. She forced herself to move away, to go back to the kitchen, to hide from prying eyes. There, amid the sparkling dishes and the smell of fresh herbs, she pressed herself against the cool marble countertop. Her thoughts raced. Her heart pounded loudly. What was this photograph doing here? Why had no one told her? Why had her past, which had seemed modest and colorless to her, suddenly surfaced within the walls of a luxurious home where she was a nobody? "You should talk to him," came a soft voice from behind. Clara shuddered. She turned around. A young man stood before her, tall, in a dark suit. His eyes were deep, blue, and there was something warm in them. He didn't look like an ordinary guest. There was no superiority or surprise in his gaze, only attentiveness. "Sorry?" "With that man at the portrait. He looked at you as if he saw someone he had lost long ago." Clara froze. She remembered, yes, there was someone. An older man with silver hair who had noticed her looking at the photograph. "How can you be so sure?" she asked cautiously. The man smiled slightly with the corner of his lips. "Because I felt the same way when I first saw you." She didn't know what had shocked her more, the photograph or that look, that voice. His name was Lucas Weiss. His name meant nothing to her, but the intonation with which he said "you" seemed familiar. A silence fell between them, not awkward, but rich, as if they were already connected by something, even though they didn't know it yet. "Are you from this family?" Clara breathed out. "In a sense. My great-grandfather was the owner of this house. I am here at the invitation of the von Eltendorf family. They are my distant relatives." Clara nodded. Her thoughts were still spinning around the photo. "I don't think I'm here by chance," she said almost in a whisper. "That feeling doesn't happen often. Lucas responded. And it's usually not a lie. She found herself back in the hall, no longer working, but as an observer. The servants had dispersed. The guests, engrossed in conversation, paid no attention to her. She approached the wall of photographs, closer this time. Her eyes met the girl's face again. Nearby were other photographs, women in formal attire, men in military uniform, children. They were all part of history. And she suddenly realized, so were they. The same old man, Friedrich Martens, appeared. He stood next to her and, as if by chance, said, "It's a beautiful photograph, isn't it?" Clara nodded, her throat dry. "It's me," she said. "I don't know how, but it's me." Friedrich looked at her with a slight smile, understanding sparkling in his eyes. "I knew you would come back, someday." The words struck her like a blow. She took a step back. "Excuse me, you... Who are you?" "I was Wilhelm von Eltendorf's valet. He was your grandfather, Fräulein Bergmann. And you are the granddaughter of his daughter Elizabeth." The name echoed. Clara felt something shift inside her. Elizabeth. The name she had heard her mother say in rare, almost incoherent phrases. Her mother never spoke of the past, only fragments that did not add up. "It's impossible," she breathed out. "Possibly, and you know it." Friedrich led her into the library, a quiet room with oak shelves, old books, and lamps that illuminated the world hidden behind the leather bindings. He placed an old diary in front of her, its pages tattered and its leather cover. "It's his handwriting," he said. "Open it." Clara leafed through the first page with trembling hands. It was written in calligraphic handwriting. "For Anna, my granddaughter. You are the light in a house that has become too dark." She closed her eyes. That was it. The feeling of being lost was gone. All this time, her story had not been lost. It had simply been hidden, and now it was coming back, step by step, word by word. And somewhere outside the window, in the soft whisper of the evening wind, the house seemed to exhale. "You've returned." Clara had not slept much that night. After she had been escorted to the library, where Friedrich had left her a diary, her thoughts had been restless. She sat in the tiny staff room, temporarily assigned to her, with the old, yellowed pages in front of her, like a treasure map that led not to gold, but to herself. The handwriting was delicate, almost musical. The first lines touched her deeply. "My dear Clara, if you ever enter these walls again, know that you have always been a part of them. I did not know if I could earn forgiveness, but I hope you will know how much you were loved." The words seemed to rip the air out of her. She could not remember this man. She could not connect his voice with any memory. And yet, there was something inexpressibly close about these lines. Warm. At dawn, wrapped in a woolen blanket, she went out onto the balcony of the old tower of the villa, which overlooked the hills, shrouded in a light fog. Everything around was as if in a half-sleep, unclear, unsteady, but beautiful. At that moment, Lucas appeared next to her. He was dressed in a simple pullover and jeans, his hair slightly tousled. He simply stood next to her, without asking any unnecessary questions. They stood in silence for a few minutes, until Clara spoke. "Wilhelm was my grandfather," she said, still not quite believing what she had said. "And Elizabeth, my mother. I didn't know. My mother never told me. She kept it a secret my whole life." Lucas turned to face her, his face soft and attentive. "Are you angry with her?" Clara sighed. "I don't know. Probably yes. And at the same time, I understand. If she was kicked out, if her love was not accepted, if she left to protect me, maybe she thought she was doing the right thing." "Do you think she did the right thing?" Clara gripped the balcony railing. "I think she cut me off from a part of myself, and now I'm standing here, in a house that feels like my own, but that until yesterday was completely foreign to me. They went back inside, and Lucas led her into the old music room, where he said Elizabeth had spent hours at the piano. The instrument was still there, slightly out of tune but still majestic. Lucas placed his hand on it, as if greeting an old friend. My mother used to say that Elizabeth played every morning, even when no one was listening. She just couldn't keep quiet, he said. And you know, as a child I would often crawl under the piano to listen to the sound from below, through the body. I didn't understand who was playing, but the music stayed with me. Clara walked around the room, her gaze caught on old sheet music, on a small porcelain ballet slipper on the shelf. Everything seemed terribly familiar to her. She sat down at the piano, ran her fingers over the keys. The first chord sounded muffled but clear. She closed her eyes and began to play a simple melody that she always played as a child, not knowing where it came from in her memory. Lucas froze. I remember it, he whispered. That tune. Elizabeth played it. I remember it clearly. It was her lullaby. Clara stopped. Her fingers were shaking. She didn't know if she was crying or just breathing too deeply. So, it's from her, she whispered. It was in me all the time. Later, they returned to the library, where Friedrich was already waiting for them. He put a new folder on the table. It was thicker, covered with green velvet. This is an archive. Copies of letters, photographs, testimonies. Everything that Wilhelm kept connected with Elizabeth and you, he said. He was a firm man, sometimes too much. But at the end of his life, he understood everything. He waited. He searched. But he did not find. Because your mother was afraid that he would take away the most precious thing from her again. Clara flipped through the pages. There were photographs of Elizabeth young and laughing, holding a paintbrush, of her and a man whose face was unfamiliar, but whose eyes held the same kindness as Clara's. She clutched the photo, trying to contain the sudden wave of emotion. This was her father, the one she knew nothing about, no name, no destiny. His name was Thomas, Friedrich said, as if he had read her thoughts. He was an artist from Stuttgart. Elizabeth fell in love with him at first sight, but it was unacceptable for the family. He died a year after you were born, an accident. And then your mother finally broke all ties, hid. Clara covered her face with her hands. Her chest tightened. All these years she had lived with the feeling of empty space. Now she knew why. Lucas sat down next to her. He didn't touch her, didn't hug her, but he was just there. His silence said more than any words. What now? She asked. What do I do with all this? Friedrich smiled softly. To be yourself. Here, or wherever you want. But now you know the truth. That already gives you a choice. Not fear, not uncertainty, but a choice. Later that afternoon, Clara sat in the Rose Conservatory, away from the bustle. The sun shone through the colored glass panels, playing on her face. She held the letter from Wilhelm in her lap. She read the lines over and over. If you have found this house, then you have found yourself. You belong to this story, and now you can rewrite it as you see fit. You don't have to accept everything, Lucas's voice suddenly said behind him. You can just be. Not like von Eltendorf, but like Clara. You decide who you want to be. What if I don't know who to be? He came closer and smiled. Then let's look for it together. And in that moment, Clara realized she had already begun to do it. With every page, with every chord, with every step through the house that, despite all the wounds, still held the doors open for her. The air in the library was thick with the dust of time and the pungent scent of old paper. Clara sat at a massive oak desk, a diary in front of her, the one that had belonged to Wilhelm von Eltendorf. Its pages rustled under her fingers as if they were whispering a door into the past. Lucas sat nearby, slightly to the side so as not to disturb her, but close enough for her to feel his presence. Morning light flickered through the windows, filling the room with soft gold, as if history itself had decided to illuminate the moment. The first pages of the diary were devoted to everyday events, managing the household, travel, family traditions. They showed the restrained pride and confidence of a man brought up in strictness, convinced that order and honor are the highest virtues. But with each new page, the handwriting became less confident, the sentences more personal. And then, finally, the moment came when the name of Elizabeth, Clara's mother, was mentioned for the first time. She is stubborn. Talented, of course, but stubborn. This Thomas. He is not from our circle. An artist, a bohemian, without family, without wealth. And yet in her eyes, he is the whole world. I forbade them to meet. Not because I do not want her to be happy, but because I am afraid. The world is changing. But I am not yet ready for my home to change too. Clara felt conflicting emotions rising inside her, anger and understanding, pain and sympathy. She scrolled further. Today she left, without a shout, without a scene, she just left. She said, "I can't live where love is forbidden." And that was it. I looked at her back, and perhaps for the first time in my life I felt that I had lost not an argument, but something more. She closed her eyes. The words seemed pulsating, alive. This wasn't just the past, it was a direct line to her present. The man who had caused her mother's exile was sorry. Sincerely sorry, but silently. Too late. He loved her in his own way, she said out loud, almost to herself. But he couldn't say it out loud. He was a man of his time, Lucas said softly. Principles, but not emotions. Perhaps he learned to love too late. Clara turned to the next spread. The entry was dated about a year later. Elizabeth has had a daughter. I found out about it by accident. Her name is Clara. I asked Friedrich to find them. He couldn't. The address was false. I feel like I'm losing the last thread. This girl is my blood. And like a fool, I won't be able to see or hear her. And all because at the time I couldn't just say, "I understand." Clara froze. She looked at the page as if in a mirror. He knew about her. He was looking for her. And he kept the memory. He tried, she whispered, even if he didn't know how. Lucas stepped closer. His hand rested on her shoulder, gentle but firm. There was no pity in his touch, only support. He didn't get over the mistake, he said. But you do. You're here. Later that day, Clara returned to the greenhouse, to the corner where she had found a little silence amidst everything that was tearing itself apart inside her. In her hands, she held the small leather box that Friedrich had given her that morning. For a long time she had hesitated to open it, but now, after reading the diary, after touching a foreign but already familiar past, she was ready. Inside was a thin chain with a pendant. Inside the pendant was a tiny photograph of a child. Her. And on the back was engraved, "Für meine kleine Sonnenblume, Vieh," for my little sunflower, Wilhelm. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Clara refused to let them fall. She slowly put the chain on, feeling its weight as a reminder that even if the memory was erased, traces of love remained. By evening, Friedrich found her again in the library. "There's something else," he said. "A portrait that's still in the North Gallery. It was painted by Thomas. He painted Elizabeth. But then, he added you." Clara froze. "Me?" "You were a child, very small. But in your mother's arms, you. The only trace of his fatherhood left within these walls." They walked down a narrow corridor where the light from the lamps was warm but dim. The northern gallery had not been used for a long time. It was where old paintings were kept, written off from the main wing. And here was a canvas in a gilded frame, covered with fabric. Friedrich slowly pulled back the cover. A woman stood before them, beautiful, with expressive features, in a green dress, sitting by the window. In her arms was a baby, wrapped in a white blanket. The child's face was barely visible, but there was something painfully familiar in his eyes. Clara took a step closer. Nearby on the frame was the signature. Elizabeth mit Licht. Elizabeth with light. He didn't sign it with a name, Clara whispered. Because the light is me. Lucas stood behind him, his voice quiet but clear. You are the light that has returned to this house. Later, sitting in the living room by the fireplace, they did not speak. They only listened to the crackling of the logs. In the silence, Clara said, I feel like I've been reborn by discovering all this, like I was on the border between who I was and who I can become, and now I can choose. Lucas looked at her for a long time, studying her. Who do you want to become? She smiled, slowly, as if for the first time. By myself, without lies, without gaps, without other people's decisions for me. And at that moment she knew. The house that had once been a cold monument to the fates of others was now becoming hers, not only in name, but in spirit. And she was ready to move on, ready to meet her mother, to hear everything, and to forgive. Or not to forgive, but to understand. The rain began suddenly. It was not loud or violent, but rather thin, fine, almost weightless. It only added to the sense of anticipation that had filled the Eltendorf villa since the morning. That day, Clara had woken up earlier than usual, with the feeling that something was lurking behind the walls, ready to move. She sat by the window in her room, watching the drops trickle down the glass, and thought about the letter she held in her hands. The letter was old, slightly faded, but sealed. There were only 2 words on the envelope. For K. For K. Friedrich had given her this letter the day before, adding only, He left it the day of your last photograph. He said that if you ever came back, this should be the first thing you had. Clara did not open it right away. At first she was afraid that she would find too much pain, too much guilt, and then that she would find nothing. But now, with the rain giving the moment a soft detachment, she decided to open it. The handwriting was the same as in the diary, strict, elegant, a little old-fashioned. The letter began simply, My Clara. Perhaps you read this when you already know a lot, or perhaps you hold it in your hands when you still don't remember anything. Either way, you're here, and that means you found your way back, or maybe it found you. Forgive me for once being too proud to accept your mother's love. I thought I was protecting the family, but I was the one who destroyed it. I wasn't prepared for how much I would regret, but I always hoped, always, that you would one day know how much you were loved, even if only in silence. If you open this letter, it means the house breathes again. And with it, memory and blood and forgiveness. With love, your grandfather, Wilhelm. Clara read the letter 3 times. There were no loud confessions, only silence, in which the truth resounded. She carefully folded it back like a sacred relic and put it in the chest of drawers. Then she got up, got dressed, and without waiting for breakfast, went downstairs, where, it seemed to her, Friedrich was already busy with something. He stood in the hall by the old clock that had stopped many years ago when the owner of the house died. His face was concentrated, but when he saw Clara, he smiled slightly. You woke up early. I didn't sleep, she admitted. Today, she's coming, right? Friedrich nodded. Yes, your mother is already on her way. Clara felt her insides tighten. Her heart beat unevenly. She had been waiting for this meeting, and at the same time she was afraid of it. Elizabeth. The woman she had known only as Mom, stubborn, a little silent, with a sadness in her eyes that she never explained. Now they were to see each other not just as mother and daughter, but as 2 women between whom there were decades of silence and one huge secret. There were still a few hours before Elizabeth arrived. Clara spent them in the studio, the same bright room on the second floor where, according to Lucas, her father had once painted. The room was surprisingly intact. Dried brushes lay on the table, a half-finished sketch, covered in time, on the easel. Clara ran her fingers along the edge of the table. There were traces of her father, whom she had never known. She imagined him standing by the window, mixing paints, casting a shadow on the canvas, inhaling the smell of oil paint. He was alive here, in the smells, in the dust, in the light. Lucas showed up around midday. He knocked, entered without a word, and simply sat down next to her, as if he sensed that Clara needed presence rather than an explanation. "Are you nervous?" he asked when the pause dragged on. "Very," she answered quietly. "I'm afraid I won't recognize her. I'm afraid she's not who I imagined, that I'm not who she wants to see." Lucas placed his hand on her palm. "She is your mother. She made a mistake, perhaps, but she has not disappeared. She is coming back. That means she wants to talk." When the car pulled up to the villa, Clara was standing on the steps, in the rain, without an umbrella, just as she was. A woman in a dark coat, with wet hair that the wind immediately scattered over her shoulders, got out of the car. Their eyes met. Elizabeth had the same eyes as Clara, eyes that once looked out from a portrait in a gallery. They didn't rush toward each other. There were no hugs, no tears. Just a long, heavy silence. Then Elizabeth walked forward, slowly, carefully. She stopped a step away from her daughter. "You've grown up," she said. Her voice was hoarse, as if it hadn't been spoken for a long time. "You've aged," Clara replied, not rudely, just genuinely. They both smiled, timidly, humanly. Friedrich led them into the very room where Clara had read her diary, into the library. Both understood. Only here, among the pages of the past, would it be possible to speak for real. Elizabeth spoke first. "I left because I loved your father, because I could no longer live in a house where love was measured by titles. And when he died, I was alone. I was afraid that if I came back, they would take you away from me. I wanted to protect you, from the family name, from the legacy, from the expectations. I didn't know that by protecting you, I was depriving you." Clara listened. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she looked away. "I found the diary," she said when her mother had finished. "I found the letter, and the portrait. You took all that away from me, but you gave me something else. You raised me with love, even if you didn't say anything. I'm angry with you, but I'm grateful too." "I missed you every day," Elizabeth whispered, "but I didn't know how to get back." "You're back already," Clara replied. "And if you want to stay, really stay, I don't mind." After that, they didn't speak. They just sat there, holding hands, as if no time had passed between them, but just a pause in the dialogue. Late in the evening, when Clara went out onto the terrace, the rain stopped. The clouds dispersed, and the stars appeared in the sky. Lucas was already waiting for her with 2 cups of tea. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes." "We talked, not about everything, but this is just the beginning. Sometimes getting started is the hardest part," he noted. They looked at the stars in silence. Then Clara said, "I'm staying, here, not because it's an inheritance, but because it's my history. I'm not running from it anymore." Lucas squeezed her hand. "Then maybe I should stay too." Clara smiled. This time, for real. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she wasn't alone anymore. And that meant anything was possible. At dawn, Villa Eltendorf was still dozing, shrouded in a thin haze that lay over the ground, damp from the night's rain. Clara stood barefoot in the grass, ignoring the chill, and watched the sun rise over the hills. The air was filled with silence and the smell of wet earth, and inside her there was a calm, deep, unfamiliar but surprisingly light. In the last few days, everything she had carried inside for years, fears, emptiness, questions, had shifted, transformed, as if the walls inside had collapsed, and now in their place there were windows through which light streamed. The house no longer seemed alien. It was no longer a museum of alien memories. Now it breathed differently, as a place where every step Clara took left a mark not just on the floor, but in history. She walked along the gravel path, returning to the house, and noticed how the window in the far wing was already open. That meant Friedrich was awake, as always, before everyone else. After breakfast, at the large oak table in the ancient dining room, they discussed the future of the villa. It was Lucas's idea to turn the estate into a cultural space, not just preserve it, but revive it. He spoke of it with fire in his eyes, but without pressure, as if he felt that the decision had to come from her. "We could hold artist residencies here," he said, unfolding the map in front of him. "Your father was an artist, Clara. Imagine how symbolic it would be for others to be able to create here, in the house where the love of art was born. We'll preserve the library, restore the studio, even open a gallery." Clara listened, cupping her hands around her. Her mother sat next to her, silent, but her gaze was warm and approving. Over the last few days, a connection had been established between them, thin and unbreakable, like a silk thread. They didn't talk about everything. There was still too much between the lines, but now Clara didn't feel the walls, only the doors, open. "I want this place to live," she said, looking up. "Not as a family monument, not as a reminder of what was, but as a point of reference, for others, for me." Friedrich smiled, as if he had heard what he had been waiting for a long time. "Then it's time to take the first step," he said. "The notary will arrive tomorrow, to formalize everything officially. The house is yours, but not just on paper, by right, in spirit." The entire day was spent in motion. Gardeners cleared the central alley. Workers removed old furniture from the west wing, preparing the space for a future workshop. Clara and her mother sorted through the archive: photographs, letters, postcards. Each box contained a piece of history that had previously been a fog for Clara. She laid them out as if assembling a puzzle, and for the first time in many years, she felt that she was not simply looking into the past, but connecting it with herself. In the afternoon, she went up to the room where it all began, the gallery. The portrait of Elizabeth and the baby had now been carefully dusted and covered with protective glass. Clara looked at it for a long time, barely breathing. A new sign had appeared under the image: Elizabeth and Clara, 1992. She ran her finger along the glass, feeling the breath of the father she had never known still hovering in every brushstroke. "You don't mind?" Lucas's voice came from the door. "What?" "That I will stay here too." Clara turned around. There was no fear in his gaze, but there was a hint of vulnerability. Honest, beautiful. "You've already stayed," she replied, "and not just in the house." He came closer and extended his hand to her. "Then let's do it together. Home, future. Whatever comes." Clara took his hand. She didn't know how it would be. She didn't know if it would work, but she knew that she wasn't afraid anymore. And that for the first time in her life, she had not just a person by her side, but a path they were walking together. The next day, the notary arrived. Official signatures, papers, stamps, all this seemed secondary. The main thing had happened before, in the heart. When the notary left and the door slammed softly behind him, Clara stood in the center of the hall. Friedrich, Elizabeth, and Lucas stood in a semicircle. She looked at them and, as if addressing the house itself, said, "I'm home." In the evening, they set the table on the terrace. The wind had died down, the sky was clear, the stars were distinct, as if someone high up had lit them specially. Clara sat, hugging a warm mug of tea, and listened to Friedrich tell a story. Not from books, but from his own youth. Lucas laughed, nodded, And Elizabeth looked at her daughter the way Wilhelm once might have looked at her, with deep, silent pride. Clara took a pendant from her pocket with the inscription engraved on it, Für meine kleine Sonnenblume. She held it in the palm of her hand as a promise, as a symbol that love, even misguided, could be preserved and passed on. Tomorrow, she said suddenly, I want to open all the windows in the east wing and put flowers in every room. Why? Asked the mother. Because this house shouldn't be closed anymore. It should smell of life. Lucas took her hand. They looked at the fire in the fireplace, and it seemed that this evening, this simplicity, was all they needed. No big words, no plans for decades, just the present, in which there is no more pain, and there is only light. And in this light, Clara, the one who was lost, became herself. Not someone's granddaughter, not someone's daughter, not the heir to a family name, but a woman who had found not only a home, but a voice, who had accepted the past so that she could freely move into the future, who was no longer afraid to know who she was,